It really would be nice right now to be in the frame of mind of Bernie Lau, corrupt Seattle police officer and undercover narcotics detective. He wrote a book called Dance with the Devil, the memoirs of an undercover narcotics detective. And, you hang out drinking Budweiser all day, doing a couple shots of Yukon Jack here and there. He's trying to fit in with what he says are the lowlifes and assholes that he's going to bust for drugs. And then eventually he starts doing a little bit of cocaine. And after a 15-year career, he retires on some sort of medical disability. And this is his story. It's a self-published book, and there's some problematic behavior. It's funny, the book is written recently, and you think he would have had time to back and maybe revise and polish up some of his problematic behavior, but no, it's here for everyone. There's a bit of racism, little homophobia, transphobia, all that kind of, imagine a Seattle police officer in 1979. The SPD has been corrupt since the 19th century. There was finally some sort of a cleanup in the late 60s. There was basically this long-running system where cops would accept bribe money from local establishments, bars that had gambling, strip clubs that were bars that had gambling. And so the beat cops would just go collect, envelopes of cash, making their rounds, and then they'd keep some and they kick some back up to the bosses, just like the fucking mafia. Sadly, today's July 25th, 2020, and I'm recording this early in the morning, and then I'm going to go contribute to what are some protests, and the feds are in town. So you have the Seattle police have been beating on and gassing protesters, are now going to be joined by the feds. And if what has been happening in Portland for well over a month starts up again here, it's going to be very ugly tonight. So please stay safe out there. And now I'm excited to talk about Bernie Lau, Corrupt Seattle Cop, Doomed Planet, the podcast, episode 40. We don't need to go into the history of Seattle police corruption. We're just going to dive into Bernie's book and have him tell the story of his life being a sketchy, trying to fit in with sketchy characters and then becoming one himself. What often happens with these undercover narc types. Bernie is not the only corrupt Seattle cop to write a book. Emmett Watson, 1994, Cop's Book Chronicles Corruption. Neil Maloney writes a book. Seattle Police Department, 1968 to 70, Assistant Chief, 71 to 74, Chief, Port of Seattle Police, 75 to 81, Chief, Washington State Patrol. Okay, so he's writing about the corruption. Of course, it's not him. No. And then he says, and this is in 1994, the Seattle police have improved tremendously in the last 20 years, and 95% of our cops do the best they can at all times, but we still have a way to go. This is by the late, great Emmett Watson, journalist for the Seattle PI. And that's bullshit. That's the bad apple theory that all cops are not bad, which as of late, even the most conservative, sheltered, upper middle class, racist white person is starting to doubt that after just looking on Twitter or anywhere really, even on corporate mainstream media news. You're going to see some police violence and police murder and think, what? Cops? What is that? Why they call them? Bernie, this is a long book. We'll skip part one. This is the story of his childhood. He grew up in France, and his mom, the dad, left early on and abandoned the family. And his mom hooked up with this American soldier stationed in France who was also Asian. And so he adopted Bernie, and they started traveling around the world. And Bernie became Bernie Lau. And he does speak fluent French, and that's going to come in handy for him. Not directly, but just in a couple cool chapters where, oh, I didn't know you spoke French. Ne sais pas. So, like a typical army brat, Bernie's moving around, living in different places. He lives a great deal of time in Hawaii, and that's always going to stick with him, especially that's where he gets some martial arts training. And the last chapter of his life, he's still alive. He's a martial arts master of Aikido. Part two of the book we will skip. Bernie is in the Navy, and he's working on submarines. And, what good self-published autobiography would be complete without salacious sex scenes? And there are lots in this book, and of course, they're stationed in Japan, and the people on the submarines have their own house of prostitution that's only for Navy guys. And the sex scenes, graphic pornography, basically. The bragging about your sex life. Yeah, I get that. And then some just very explicit. And it's like, okay, you had sex. Yeah, human beings do that. So let's move on. And then part three is going to be about him becoming a cop. And he gets into some trouble with drugs and alcohol, literally. And then he retires. And given how generous city budgets are with the police, I'm getting he still gets a pension to this day. He retired in 1983, so that's the budget. That's the priority. Keep paying the cops and pay them well. Hey, let's try to wrap up the end of Bernie's story now before we get into the corrupt cop stuff. He was one of the original students of one of the founders of Aikido, Tohei Sensei, when he was in Hawaii in 1954. And he studied it since then. However, during his police work, he determined that Aikido, while a unique martial art, is not going to work if someone is going to be aggressive or out of their minds and stuff. It's pretty useless if you plan to initiate the force. In other words, it's about deflecting the energy that someone's bringing to you. So Aikido is not for police work. And so that's why Bernie kind of comes up with this hybrid Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu, Judo stuff. Again, ask Joe Rogan about that. That's not my area of expertise. But Bernie, one of the original students of Aikido, kind of transforms and starts his own little branch that has more of a violent component to it. And he does that to this day. In fact, you can go to BernieLau.com. He's working with a couple other guys, and he fits the perfect part of the elderly Zen martial arts master. Not just his outfits and his hair, but he almost could pass for like a grizzled old Asian guy, even though he's not Asian. And so that's great. He really had an interesting life, traveling all around the world as a kid, and then he's this berserk cop that's a psychopath, and then he just mellows out and does some martial arts, but not the most fearsome of the head bashing kind of martial arts, just sort of the Aikido with a little bit of a extra aggression put in there. And yeah, again, there's some problematic crap in the book that he's unapologetic for, but in general, he seems like a great guy and absolutely the guy you'd want to hang out with and have some sake or Bud Light or Budweiser, and yeah, I'd love to hear his stories firsthand. It's too bad there's not an audio book for this. Speaking of audiobooks, Jeff Bezos owns Audible. I believe Michael Moore is still advertising for Jeff by pimping for Audible on his podcast. And it's a great thing. The Kindle is a great thing. This book was free because, again, they Kindle Unlimited, if you're a Prime member, you get like the worst of the worst self-published books to download for free. One thing, it's not easy to self-publish a book, an ebook. You have to have this certain file and set up your document a certain way. And this book is fucked up. One thing is that there are random page numbers appear in the text. And the other is at a certain point in the book, it just stops and goes black. And then you have to go and start the book, like go back to the book and open it back up and jump ahead to the page ahead of where you were at. So I'm not sure too many people have gotten through this book. And according to Audible, it takes 6 hours to read the book. I certainly have spent a lot of time on the book. So, okay, he's out of the Navy, and long story short, he wants to be a Seattle cop, but he can't pass the written test. He tries a couple times. He passes the fireman's test, but he wants to be a cop, so he gets hired by the University of Washington to be a UW cop, and he doesn't like that much. He says he can go a whole week without getting one radio call, so he's just driving around aimlessly on campus, especially during summer break. There is some action. He talks about Hippie Hill, and we covered that in our episode, Seattle's Not So Swinging 60s. This was an area where a lot of hippies hung out and some cop action happening. There's also the first sex scene set in Seattle. There's some of that when he's in the Navy, of course. And boy, it's really explicit, and it goes on for many, many pages. Then eventually he's going to go to the police academy and become a Seattle cop. And they do training when you're out of the academy. You ride with different cops and learn the beat and stuff. And on his first training ride, the cop he's with pulls a briefcase out of the back of the trunk of the car, and it's got drugs of all kinds. And he's like, oh yeah, this is for assholes. If someone gives me lip or gives me a hard time, I plant drugs on them. And of course, it's a cliche, but it's like, forget everything you learned in the police academy, chump. You're in the real world now. And after a lot of that drudgery and beating on people, he gets a job as an undercover cop with his buddy Dale Eggers. And there's made-up dialogue. I love when people make up dialogue from 50 years ago. It's not that artful, but one of their first undercover assignments is to bust homosexuals in Volunteer Park, because, of course, that's a menace to society. So the commander tells them, recently we've had complaints from concerned citizens stating that, come nightfall, the parks are being taken over by perverts, especially Volunteer Park. Decent citizens and their kids can't use the park's public restrooms without being accosted by these lowlifes. I want you both to start hanging out around there and see what's actually going on. Make an arrest if you see any illegal sexual activity. The chief is aware of what's happening in the parks and has, in fact, requested that you two work on this assignment. Good luck, man. And I guess this qualifies as another pornographic sex scene and more bragging. No sooner did I go into the restroom to step up to the urinal and take a pee than a white male entered the bathroom. He stood behind me and started to rub his... So, no way, dude, I said as he reached over and grabbed my balls. I yelled out, hey, asshole, police, you're under arrest. The pervert was completely taken by surprise. By the third night, Eggers and I were bringing in so many gays that the duty sergeant was starting to complain to the watch commander about being swamped with paperwork. And then they're like, all right, limit your arrests to 8 per night. If you get 8 arrests per shift, then you can go home and call it a night. And Volunteer Park wasn't our only hunting ground. In the early 70s, Pike Street in Seattle was known as the prostitution area. So Bernie, as an undercover narc, is going to spend a great deal of time downtown in the First, Second, and Pike area. Downtown until the late 80s and even after was a seedy, slimy, sordid, dirty, derelict area full of strip clubs and other just nastiness. Just especially in that little core area right across from the wonderful Pike Place Market. I guess every book from this era has a description of 8mm pornographic movies, extreme bondage, under-the-counter sales of child pornography. And there were movie arcades. And that's where individuals would go view pornographic movies in private, or, as happened more often than not, with another male. Just to set the record straight, none of this behavior is inherently or necessarily dangerous. And I guess women working these places are being victimized, but even the drug stuff, it's like they're going to send them up to Alaska to narc on people and entrap people. And it's like, dude, whatever. Let the guys working on the Alaska oil pipeline do their cocaine so they get more overtime hours. So it's really Bernie's whole career as a cop, and anyone's career as a cop, is wasteful and useless and basically destructive to society. That's why we need to defund the fucking cops and probably just abolish 99% of them. Okay, Bernie is a homophobe, gays, perverts, you name it. They would all gather there once the sun went down, all huddled together like a bunch of vampires sucking on each other. The scene was surreal and disgusting. Someone should option the movie rights to this. Maybe not, because Bernie is no hero, and he's no anti-hero either. He's just a sort of charming cop that maybe would be sympathetic on the big screen, but only if you made this if Paul Verhoeven was to direct it, and there was more martial arts action. That could be good. Oh, and then guess what? The media gets a hold of this busting people at Volunteer Park, and there's an uproar in the community. So here you go, Seattle. The police shouldn't have been pursuing victimless crimes. And of course, Bernie has victimless crimes in quotes. Oh, especially when people were breaking into people's homes at an alarming rate. Legendary Seattle Times columnist Rick Anderson broke that story. And of course, the cops are outraged that they're being criticized for doing this, and they release a statement. Homosexual seductions in public facilities involve innocent victims, including small children and teenagers. Prostitution, gambling, and drug traffic not only victimize the residents of the community where it is allowed, but also attracts the dregs of humanity into those cities. And of course, Bernie and his other narc buddies are going to bust what were called body painting shops. These were little tiny body shops or body studios, as they were called, downtown, that were basically fronts for prostitution. The gals worked in cubicles, so that's charming. He finds two people having sex in a body shop, and they're talking to each other in French. It turns out it's a sailor from a French naval vessel that's visiting Seattle. The lady is a local student who also speaks French, and so he's sitting there busting them for having sex in this place. Really a victimless crime. And speaking to them in French. So yeah, being bilingual is coming in handy. Finally, in 1975, the city of Seattle passed the Body Studio Ordinance. They banned body studios, so you can't massage, feel, handle, or touch. Gross. A particular dirtbag operating some of these strip clubs at the time is mentioned by name, Roger Pomarlo. But fuck him, we're not going to spend too much time. He's an abuser of women and a pimp and that sort of thing, so whatever. A lot of this was a ripoff. He's trying to entrap a prostitute, and he says, "How much for this sexual act?" She says, 100, and he gives the money, and then she says, "Okay, fuck off." And he's like, "I'm not leaving." And then two bad bouncer dudes come in and start kicking the shit out of him. So he calls his uniformed cop buddies. They come and they see that he's bleeding from his mouth. And so they just swarm on these two bouncers and kick the fuck out of them. And then they're handcuffed on the ground. And the one cop says over and says, "Do you have anything to say to these two guys who assaulted you?" And he says, "I got the message." "Sure," I said. "I went over and gave each of them a good football kick to the balls." And then later he says that he lies in court when the judge asks him. He says, "I did not lay a hand on either of them." And so it's not perjury because he kicked them and he didn't use his hands. And again, this is just normal general cop behavior. This is not this transgressive bad cop that is doing these outrageous things. This is everyday shit. There's a big scene with a sniper at the Bush Hotel that's in the International District. And at least the sign is still there, right? I couldn't find any information online about this terrible shootout at the Bush Hotel. His partner is there, and the assailant, after this big shootout, says, "Okay, I'm coming out. I surrender." And then his partner, Dale, is like, steps from out of his cover, thinking, "Oh, he's surrendering," and gets shot by the guy. So the cops have shotgun shells, but they also have slugs along with the normal rounds. Apparently that's, I'm not a firearms expert. A slug is an ounce of lead designed to go through a cement block. So they fired some of those at the guy. 5 officers got shot during the Bush Hotel sniper incident. The guy got blown away through the door, the sniper. Turns out he had a single gauge shotgun, one you had to reload every time he shot. So this probably happened. So there's this woman urinating, and he's like, "Hey, stop that." And this big, huge guy comes over and is like, "Don't fuck with her." And he's like, "Cop, turn around." And this is where he realizes that Aikido techniques don't work against aggressors who are, determined to fuck you up. And it's funny because Steven Seagal, that's his discipline, is Aikido. And there's some laughable stuff on YouTube of Steven Seagal, going after someone and then easily, or someone's going after Steven Seagal and then he's easily flipping them. But it's obvious that they're just flopping into jelly and they're not resisting at all.
This motherfucker, he's crazy.
In Aikido, your training partner is taught to never resist. It's almost more like modern dance than some martial arts are going to fuck someone up. And again, I know the general principle of all these disciplines is to never use your power. Never, ever use your power unless absolutely necessary at the last moment.
Hey, I'm not gonna shoot you. These guys are gonna beat you to death. Yeah, you come to our neighborhood to fuck with our people, huh? Well, now people are gonna fuck with you. Túmbale la cabeza, vamos!
I like how Bernie mentions food. So many biographies don't mention food or describe meals. Bernie likes to go to Ivar's on the waterfront, the Seattle waterfront, and have scallops and chips. So this drunk guy fucks with them, and then he bashes his partner pretty badly, and it's like alert. Suddenly they send out, "Okay, officer down," and the sound of police sirens from all directions coming to the rescue was heard. Seeing that Officer Hawk was severely injured and bleeding about his face, the responding officers went ballistic. One of their own had been injured, so the gloves came off. Several of the officers grabbed Ellis, threw him to the ground, and handcuffed him face down. One young uniformed officer focused, stepped back, paused, then rushed forward as if he were on a football field about to kick a field goal and kicked Ellis square in the head. I heard the thud of shoe hitting skull. I felt sick. I'm feeling sick to my stomach. But again, that's normal cop behavior. Now Bernie feels bad because he felt he couldn't. His Aikido failed against this brute. And instead of just arresting a drunk, he's caused this mayhem. And like many victims of Seattle police abuse, this guy was awarded $65,000. And again, probably second and last time I'll mention it, I was arrested, falsely accused of something in Seattle, spent the day in jail. I won $5,000. And my attorney was like, well, it's too bad they didn't fuck you up. All you had to do is sit in jail. Normally, we can get much bigger settlements if you're physically abused. And again, Aikido is great, but he says, I personally would recommend cross-training. Continue Aikido training, but also train in some other martial art, like the kind where you can whip your finger into someone's eye socket and pull out their eyeball. There's a chapter called The War on Drugs, and he says, ever since I was 16, I wanted to become a narc. So they're like, that's easy. Let your hair grow. Don't shave. Don't wash your clothes. And don't tell anyone, friends or family, that you're working undercover. Also, you're probably going to get arrested, as does happen to him. Dumbass cops don't know any better. And again, they're suspect to corruption. So they don't know that you're working undercover, and they might fuck with you, rough you up, and arrest you. That happens to Bernie more than once. And so Bernie becomes John Abel Medeiros, drug dealer from Hawaii. Then there's a funny scene for the narc training. They're supposed to simulate how to smoke a joint without inhaling, Bill Clinton style. And after doing this simulating in air quotes, they all end up in McDonald's wolfing down a bunch of food. And again, this is a truism, and Bernie learns this soon enough and then gets in trouble with addiction. You don't fake it when some drug dealer offers you a line of blow. There's no way to fake it, and you can't really fake smoking a joint either. If you're an undercover narc, you're going to have to do this. There's a lot of ways to avoid it and to not be doing it all the time. But again, Bernie is now going to spend his days hanging out in seedy dives, sipping on a Budweiser, and starting to do some drugs. For some odd reason, this course in how to interact with marijuana addicts had made us all extremely hungry. So this is dangerous. You're letting cops do drugs, and they apparently have no knowledge of drugs or the history of prohibition or anything of that. And they call pot users marijuana addicts. Again, this is before civil asset forfeiture, where pigs can basically confiscate any property they feel like. But they're trained to have people deliver drugs in a vehicle if possible, so they could, quote, jack the guy's car when we busted him. In 3 to 6 months, you filed a case with a prosecutor. He's almost immediately busted by other Seattle pigs, and he has to strip and get jail coveralls on and spread his ass cheeks and is booked into jail. And of course, the biggest worry for these narcs is someone is going to ID them, and he has been working as a uniformed officer around Seattle and is worried someone is going to figure out who he is. He's doing a drug buy from this black dealer, and he's selling him fake dope. He goes and he runs the test kit, and he's like, I've been burned. So they decide to go back and settle up and steal the guy's stereo. And of course, it's in a black neighborhood in a black apartment building. And suddenly 3 black males who most likely lived in the apartment up above and below came with their attitude in hand, ready to fight and kick some white honky ass. And of course, he flashes a gun and says, "Are you sure you want to mess with this?" And they, fade back into the bushes like Homer Simpson. Now we're affirming his racism here. Talk about funny. Usually black folks are the ones kicking in whitey's front door during burglaries. Now here you had two armed white dudes kicking in some black guy's front door. And again, down at the precinct house, they're going to be pissed off at this behavior. And they're like, hey, what would a normal drug dealer do if he got burned on his dope? He would come back and kick some ass. And they're like, well, you stole the lady's stereo. Please return it, which they did. Useless cops wasting everybody's time, endangering people for no reason, wasting the city budget, fucking up, being idiots. Many of them have graduated only from the 8th grade. He gets ripped off on another drug deal by a black pimp, and his friend Crusher puts the pimp dude in a chokehold, and the guy flops to the floor like a sack of flour. And he recovers the money that he got burned on the drugs, and then he tells his supervisor, and they're like, "You can't do that." And he's like, "That's what a normal drug dealer would do." And so he keeps the money and uses it, for more drug buys and to buy his Budweiser and stuff like that. I think the first time he admits to doing cocaine, he's done a bust, and he's like, "I opened the seal and took a pinch for tasting. Sure enough, it was cocaine, all right. Good quality, too. My tongue and mouth went numb."
He don't lie, he don't lie, he don't lie. Cocaine.
They're actually buying cocaine from some West Seattle rich kid, some naive white boy. And they arrest him. They put a gun to his head, and then they're driving him saying, "Oh, we're going to take you out and kill you." And they haven't identified themselves as cops. So they terrorize this poor kid. Then finally they're like, "Haha, we're cops. We're taking you to be arrested downtown." And he's like, "Oh, thank God. I'm not going to be killed." And like, what sick fucks the Seattle police. Like, it's in their DNA. I bet this book is required reading during police academy. That and like the autobiography of Steven Seagal and maybe one or two Joe Arpaio books. And of course, what would Seattle be without LSD? According to Bernie, you take a hit of acid and what follows is that reality ceases to exist. Your brain sort of short circuits. You hear things and see things that just aren't there. Oftentimes, folks freak out. Not entirely true, but there's a story here where there's some elderly hippie guy selling acid, and they're going to do a cold call. That's where they're just going to try to go up and knock on his door and try to buy drugs, out unintroduced. And so they knock on this guy's door, and he comes to the door with a shotgun, and luckily Bernie Aikidos the shotgun out of the way at the last minute, and it goes off. And there's a struggle and whatnot, and then this poor guy who has now fired a gun at a police officer, apparently he's hallucinating because he's tripping out on LSD, and he's going to be sent away to state prison. It's called a cold cop. That's where a narc is going to do a drug buy with no prior connection to the seller. Just some information. Oh, this guy might be selling drugs. This is probably not true, but in court, this poor LSD guy jumped up and said, "You fucking pig, I wish I'd blown your fucking head off, and next time I will." Here's another falsehood. Again, this book came out in 2011. Bernie says, "Today, Seattle's a clean, safe, modern city, and police officers are held accountable for their actions. There is more command supervision now than there was in the good old days. In those days, the streets of Seattle, especially around First and Pike, Belltown, Pioneer Square, and along Seattle's waterfront, were a lot tougher." That's true. Back then, there were a lot of good cops. That's not true. No cops are good. Anyway, more bragging about sex. I looked at Susan, and again she smiled that big toothless smile. I looked down at the bed, at her new set of dentures. There was something hellish about her toothless grin, and the set of dentures staring up at me from the bed. Thanks, but oh hell no. In the nicest way that I could muster up at that moment, I respectfully declined her offer. And again, he's going to do drugs and drink. Hang around drug addicts but never do drugs? It's not possible. You'll get made for a cop in no time. There's a sad story where he busts this Native American pot dealer that is smuggling kilos, dropping them from an airplane from Canada. You know, the good stuff. Even back then, that was the good stuff, the desirable, strong stuff. The Canadians figured out how to grow that. And so they, do this deal, and they meet at the East Lake Zoo, which is a great dive that I don't know about the pandemic, but was open recently. Same place he describes with the different pool tables and stuff. And they still have weird old posters from the 1970s on the walls. And anyway, they meet there and they go out to this guy's trailer in the middle of nowhere. And he's like, fine, I just met you, but I'll sell you a kilo. And then his partner is like, hands on the ground, everyone down. And he's like, oh, that's not how it works. You're supposed to do one or two more buys and then ask for more. But it turns out this guy had a huge amount, I think 100 kilos visible at his place. And they're like, we might as well bust him now. And then everyone is so happy. This is such a big bust. It's measured in quantity. We didn't even know about this guy. And now the citizens of Seattle are saved because this marijuana is no longer on the market. Even though 1,000 other people are doing the same thing and getting away with it. Because people enjoy marijuana and it's relatively harmless, you fucking dicks. He's sleeping with women that he meets on the job, including the typical woman that wants to sleep with everyone on the force. Hi, I'm Tina. I'm supposed to meet with Detective Jerry. This is not that woman. This is a informant. She was cute. Petite build, dark hair, pretty smile. Ah, yes, small titties, too. I hoped we'd end up signing her on as an informant. One of the many perks of working undercover was that we sometimes got to partner up with some hot chick that wanted to become a snitch. In one incident, they're riding with a snitch, and the girl reached over, unbuttoned his partner's... Well, again... That would never happen with Carmen Best's modern Seattle Police Department. By the way, let's defund them at least 50%. The city council, didn't they vote for that in a veto-proof vote?
And I put it out that I had pardoned, as we say, Sheriff Joe. He's done a great job for the people of Arizona. He's very strong on borders, very strong on illegal immigration. He is loved in Arizona.
I love Bernie's choice in food. I want to invite him over for dinner. He's cooking some rare liver and onions and washing them down with a couple ice-cold buds. So he buys himself a Harley Davidson chopper so he can fit the part. And almost immediately has a horrible accident and breaks his leg. And here's the cop mentality. What cop in his right mind would go to work every day with a busted leg when he could take 6 months off while still drawing his full pay tax-free? And of course, he gets the doctor to write him a prescription for 100 Demerols. Demerol and ice-cold beer. What a great combination. The Il Bistro is a great restaurant in Seattle's Post Alley in the Pike Place Market. It's described several times in this book. I guess it was the Il Bistro Tavern. Bernie spells it E-L instead of I-L. I'm not sure it was ever called the El Bistro Tavern. Anyway, they've always had great food. And Murray, the bartender, passed away recently, was a legendary Seattle bartender. So he's hanging out there eating boiled shrimp in the shell purchased from one of the nearby stalls in the market. That's the good Seattle. The good Seattle is not cops. The good Seattle is the incredible food. Seattle cops used to get free food. There's probably still free food. This is the premise of some institutions want to have cops be seen in their places. It helps with safety or the perception of safety or something. So Bernie's getting free food at Ivar's and stuff. And at one point, he's with his confidential informant. They're trying to eat at Ivar's. And apparently, I mean, it's a fish shack right now. Apparently, it was more upscale, like the one on South Lake Union right now, or on Lake Union right now. So they try to get in, and they look like scumbags, right? Because it's a CI and a narc. And the maitre d' is like, well, it will be at least an hour wait, sir. And so Bernie Lau, Seattle narc, is like, what the fuck? And then he sees like the manager who knows him. And suddenly it's like, right this way, sir, to the best table. And again, a great meal description. Dungeness crab, king crab, clams by the bucketful, fresh live oysters on the half shell, several selections of fresh salmon, freshwater trout, gooey duck. That's a clam that resembles a big dick. That's what he says, which is partially true. That's when I first moved to Seattle, I had no idea. I didn't know of this type of mollusk, or maybe only generally. I saw them in the store and I thought, oh, geoduck. And then someone corrected me. It's spelled geoduck, but no, it's pronounced gooey duck. Perhaps the Indian pronunciation of that. And so that's similar to like being in New York and you're in the East Village and you're like, oh, Houston Street. And some snide New Yorker is like, it's pronounced Houston Street. Houston Street. Houston Street. Eventually, Bernie is assigned to go to Alaska and entrap druggies. And he has some adventures in Alaska. They're trying to bust some guy for meth, and he keeps flushing this shit down the toilet. So they sneak in when he's not there, and they put a net in the sewer pipe so they can catch his stash. And they think they're real clever for doing that. And there's some scary cocaine buys. And the scariest thing about Bernie in Alaska is that now he's like claiming at least, oh, I'm drinking hard liquor. And Yukon Jack becomes his booze of choice, with a Bud back. And boy, Yukon Jack is poison. That's just some kind of really nasty mid-level whiskey is horrible. So Bernie is getting fucked up and doing some coke, and the CI that he actually lives with, someone trying to get a plea deal going by busting his friends, is a total druggie and is always like, oh, Bernie, you confiscated some coke, cut me off a gram, come on, man. And then he's immediately shooting up. So it's a bad, bad situation, Bernie. And again, what a useless waste of the fucking Seattle taxpayers' money. Like, oh, let's fly up to Alaska. After all, Seattle is the gateway to Alaska, so let's go to a different state and try to bust people. And again, let the people of Alaska have their cocaine. God, does every book I review on this podcast have a shooting up scene? Next, he drew up the liquid into a syringe, tied off his left arm, and proceeded. Yes, it's all the same thing. He trades his 9mm to some guy for a 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun that's totally illegal. It's only 14 inches long, and again, it's never explained why he did something this stupid. And so, although earlier in the book he talks about entrapping lots of black people, suddenly he's scared of doing a drug buy in Alaska because the guy is black. I didn't like what I was hearing. Black drug dealers, not good. In Seattle, we had a lot of black drug dealers. They normally stuck to selling heroin and were always paranoid. They trusted no one, especially white guys. And so this, quote, brother is going to offer him a toot or two and is going to make him do some blow. If you've ever tried that, I've only done it a few times, and it was in the 80s, a little after Bernie's heyday. It does make you feel real good until you run out. And Bernie quickly gets to the point of cocaine obsession where he's waking up in the morning and like, I feel like shit, and then I'll just do a couple bumps, and he's like, wow, this shit works great. I feel great. I'm going to conquer the day. And that's the story. You know, in Alaska, he realizes that after a period of a few years, I, Bernie Lau, would become an asshole, a biker puke, and a drug addict, just like my mentor and alter ego, Johnny Medeiros. Johnny Medeiros was every disgusting thing that I wasn't. But he was what kept me alive as I worked those dangerous undercover assignments in and about Seattle's drug-infested, crime-ridden neighborhoods. Bernie, I noticed she still had all her teeth. Even though she looked burnt out, she was still sort of cute. So one of his encounters as a narc with a young female. This is typical Bernie talking to his cop buddies. I'm down at First and Union. I need you for some backup in dealing with an asshole pimp who likes beating on 16-year-old runaways. You in the mood for a little fun and excitement? So that's about it. Bernie Lau, typical Seattle cop. He beats the hell out of people. He's a homophobe and a racist. He seduces women when he's on the job. He and his buddies take advantage of women who are the victims of domestic violence, and they're like, oh, we took care of that abuser for you. Hey, how about a date, baby? He sleeps with his informants, and he uses drugs. On Bernie's YouTube page, there's an amazing film clip, and it's of Bernie working undercover wearing a t-shirt and a jean jacket. He looks a little too clean-shaven to pass as undercover, working with the city of Everett police. And first there is they get called to take care of a drunk guy who's stumbling. Then Bernie is walking down an alley. And then suddenly there's some other guy with a shotgun robbing a store. Then the cops show up, but you know that Bernie is going to encounter this guy with the gun. And then the guy with the gun runs. Bernie sees him. And that's it. And then it cuts to a still shot of lily pads. It's almost like it's Bernie's worst fear that some guy with a gun is going to shoot him. I sort of like Bernie, but I wish he could have been more introspective when he wrote this book. And he's apologetic for making rookie mistakes a couple times, but there's so many incidents of cruelty and illegal behavior, typical cop behavior, that he does not account for. But what can you do? Bernie self-published another book called Descarado, Shameless Betrayal in the Martial Arts World. It came out in 2018, and I read a little bit of it. I guess they fly him to Japan, but he doesn't realize that in these situations they should have paid for his airfare, or might have some sour grapes about some shameless betrayal. But again, thanks for listening to episode 40 of the Doomed Planet podcast. Corrupt Seattle cop Bernie Lau. You can find out more at doomedplanet.com. Goodbye.
This is the end of the song!